Greetings. It's Monday, July the 7th, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Flooding in Texas. Mother Nature humbling us yet again. More than 100 people are thought to have been killed. A girls' summer camp swept away. Families out for hikes and camping trips over the July 4th weekend. Well, they vanished without a trace in too many cases. Central Texas has been made a disaster zone on account of the Guadalupe River rising more than 20 feet in only 2 hours, it was reported. Tragedy. A tragedy by any definition of the word, but something that happens when Mother Nature is in charge, which she always is. Sadly, lots of people are blaming everyone except her. Global warming, of course, is being held up as one of the reasons, even though these sorts of disasters have been happening since long before that became a thing. Donald Trump is being blamed, of course. Nothing surprising there. It's a given that if a star exploded light years away, the sitting president would be blamed for it by some people. No, this sort of thing happens. There's no other way to say it. But it does call attention to the fact that modern man doesn't want to admit something that's very relevant and very real. Rivers and the downpour of water from the sky often have a mind of their own. In spite of our best efforts, rivers go where they want to go. The largest river in North America, the Mississippi, it doesn't flow where it used to flow even 150 years ago. We know that because we have found shipwrecks from the Civil War buried in fields a good distance from the current shores of that river. As a species, we are not as almighty as we think we are. But what happened in Texas is still a disaster. People have been injured, killed, and in many cases made homeless. The Trump administration seems to be doing a better job than its predecessor at dealing with such things. More stories of tragedy, and I predict heroism will be told in the coming days and weeks. And there will be other cases where many people are now not as arrogant as they used to be in believing that there are no higher powers in this universe. There are, and there always will be. And speaking of beef country, another natural disaster is in the works that will be affecting America's food supply. And this one will be aided and abetted by the federal government, namely the Food and Drug Administration, better known as the FDA. That government agency is responsible for the protection of what Americans consume. And, well, they've made some interesting decisions as of late. The importation of live cattle into the United States is being resumed from south of the border in spite of the renewed threat of a very destructive insect called the New World screwworm. There is a lot to the history of that nasty little creature. Its maggot larvae live off of the flesh of living mammals, and that includes humans if they get the chance. It was a creature that was successfully eradicated in the United States back in the 1950s and 60s, but it's back. Almost certainly on account of the U.S. border being open the way it has been in the last several years. The screwworm is spreading north from where it was still active in parts of Central and South America. And that is not going to be a good thing for any living mammal north of the Rio Grande. The U.S. beef herd is much smaller than it was just a few years ago. This is being blamed on the COVID crisis. Domestic beef production in the U.S. is now pretty much the same level as it was back in the 1950s, 70 years ago. We had a much smaller population at the time, and, well, they're not doing much to rebuild the U.S. beef herd, are they? Given the traditional American taste for beef and the growth of the U.S. population over the last several decades, this has led to all sorts of corners being cut when it comes to the production of beef and other meat imports. The U.S. government will be attempting to eradicate the screwworm again using the same technique that was so successful before. It's something called insect sterilization, where the male of the species is made sterile, and, well, you can look into that if you find that sort of thing interesting. But the threat to the U.S. meat supply is quite real, and not just beef. All warm-blooded mammals are at risk from this thing, and that includes wild game animals like deer, which is becoming more of an important food supply in parts of our country. And if something is not done about this, well, you're going to see beef that's already quite expensive get even more so, and perhaps even become as much of a delicacy as caviar. This is something to watch, but it's also something you really need to get on the government about if they listen to you. Oh, and speaking of nasty creatures, the newest federal deportation facility is a big news story, and I'm talking about Alligator Alcatraz, a remote prison camp located deep in the Florida Everglades. A lot's being made about this. A lot of left-wing people are calling it a concentration camp, a death camp, all sorts of insanity, but then again, leftist usually means insane. What is the real story here? Well, in truth, that facility has been around since the late 1960s. It was supposed to have originally been a massive training airport for commercial airliners. At one point, it was supposed to be bigger than JFK Airport, but plans changed and it was turned into just a local regional airport. As the crow flies, it's very close to Miami and points south. So it was an ideal place to put up a deportation facility and send illegal invaders back to their rightful place in Central and South America. It's at the end of Florida, where the Everglades is. But why should people look at reality when imagination is a lot more interesting and entertaining and brings in more online viewers and revenue? Okay, no, it is not a concentration camp. In spite of all the brouhaha, the many alligators and other nasty predators in the Florida Everglades are not being employed to eat potential escapees, but that's just good propaganda on the part of the Trump administration. In reality, the Everglades are a very dangerous place and always have been. The truth is, southern Florida, which has a pretty significant human population, is always dealing with alligators and other nasty creatures. So much so, I always wonder why people live there. People are sometimes attacked by alligators and sometimes are killed, even in their own backyards. In 2016, a 2-year-old boy died when he was attacked, dragged into a pond, and partially consumed by an alligator at Disney World. Yes, Mickey Mouse, all that other stuff. Yeah, that can be a dangerous place as well. So making hay out of these creatures is kind of silly and a little bit insulting to those that bother to look into reality. Because that's life in Florida. Alligators. And now I'm finding out Burmese pythons are a big thing down there. I didn't know that until I looked into this. Somebody decided it was a good idea to bring foreign snakes into the country as pets, and they got released. And now it's an estimated 300,000 of these things are slithering through southern Florida, capable of swallowing human beings and digesting them. Delicious. Yes, Florida. What would we do without Florida? But in reality, it's not a big deal. This is the way people in Florida choose to live. But if the threat of such creatures terrifies the inmates of Gator Gitmo, which is another nickname being given to this facility, I say good. And good riddance when you finally leave. I hope these people have a nice flight home and are given a T-shirt that says, "I survived Alligator Alcatraz," in Spanish as a souvenir. Well, as expected, Trump's big, beautiful bill was signed into law on July 4th with all the ceremony the man loves so much. Now the real work begins, which is reading the thing and trying to figure out what it means and how it's going to be interpreted and one of the mysteries of the universe is how Americans make and implement laws. Something to follow this summer for sure. In the Middle East, the conflict between Israel and Iran seems to be still going on, at least unofficially. Reports of explosions in and around the Iranian capital continue. The cause is open to guesswork at this point. It could be the Mossad playing with toys. It could be a possible insurrection going on. No one's really sure. No rocket launches or bombs being dropped in Iran, but Israeli military activity is being reported in Syria and Yemen. No surprises there. This war was not over after 12 days, ladies and gentlemen. It's still going on. And as is the case with all wars, lots of people are being blamed for it. People who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is happening in Iran, where tyranny is something that's been going on for all too long. One religious minority in Iran that is now suffering at the hands of the Islamic Republic are the followers of a religion that originated in that tortured land many years ago. It's called Baha'i. You can check it out if you want to see what they believe and how they believe it. There's a rather large community in the United States and in other places around the world, but it came from Iran. Unfortunately, they are not Muslim, and members of the Baha'i faith that are still living in Iran are now being rounded up, either being detained and charged with aiding the Israelis in their recent military adventure, or, as is more disheartening, we're hearing about many of them being what we would call disappeared. The Muslim fanatics that rule that once great and tolerant Persian Empire are turning their attention to those they think they can victimize, and are doing so successfully. This is why starting wars is such a bad idea. No one ever knows how they're going to go or who is going to be counted in the collateral damage category. Wars are very seldom well thought out. The Israelis started this one up and hoped the U.S. would join in and take up the fight. That didn't exactly work as planned. It still might, but we're not really sure. I doubt they fully realized who would be affected or how badly when they drew up their plans to disarm Iran and try to eliminate its ability to produce nuclear weapons. It now seems a certainty that nuclear weapons will be introduced into the Middle East equation, and the world will not be a better place for it. The people who start wars never know where it's going to go. They never do. When the soldiers begin to march and the bombs begin to drop and the bodies begin to accumulate, it's never the way they thought it was going to go. And it never will be. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies and hope they become friends someday. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, clown world, the deep state, and all religious fundamentalism must be destroyed. Good day